Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Amy and I'm on a financial freedom journey with my family, and today I need to talk to you guys about a book that I read a couple weeks ago that I have not been able to stop thinking about since, and that book is Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. I have been wanting to read this book for quite a while. I just couldn't get around to it, honestly. I was like trying to read it with an open mind because I personally have seen a lot of videos from creators that I watch in the financial space that have talked about this book. So I wanted a little bit of space away from that to be able to read it with a clear mind and not have some of the biases that I've heard. So I did read it a couple weeks ago, and I've kind of tried to let myself digest the content and really come up with my clear and concise thoughts. And here I am to share that today. So like I said, we're talking about the book Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. It is a very popular book in the finance space. I think that it's a really interesting idea, especially when we're surrounded with a lot in the finance space, especially with the thought of you need to be saving more for retirement, you need to be doing this, you need to be grinding, you need to be hustling, you need to be saving 50% of your income, you need to be doing more. That's what I'm always hearing, especially in the FIRE community, which is financially independent, retire early community. That is a huge message that people are sending, is save as much as you can now so that you can retire early, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that it's an interesting parallel to read this book when you kind of have a lot of those thoughts in your head, because I felt myself being very resistant to the book, especially in the beginning, because I was just this is so stupid. Die with zero, that doesn't even make any sense. But I don't know, I have very mixed feelings about the book. The whole time I was reading it, I was very resistant towards it. I was okay, I hear what you're saying, but I don't really know how that's gonna work in practice. But at the end of the day, like I said, I've been thinking about it for weeks, so clearly it made some sort of impact on me. So let's go ahead and talk about the book, kind of cover to cover, what it goes over, and my thoughts on all of it. So the first question really that they're answering in the book is, what is Die with Zero and why would you want to die with zero? So dying with zero is exactly what it sounds like. It is setting yourself up to die with no money. So basically you are spending every single dollar that you're earning in your life, and you are not really giving any money to anyone or charities or anything at the end of your life. The goal is to die with as little as possible. Now, he does admit in the book that dying truly with zero is almost impossible, because you don't know how long you're gonna live and all these other factors that may play into that. So truly dying with zero would be a very difficult thing to do. But the ultimate goal is to die with as little as possible in your account, as low as you can possibly go, because you don't want to be giving the money to people when you're dead. That is the ultimate goal of the book, and what he is setting forth as what you should be trying to do with your money and your life. Now, I will say that this book is meant, in my opinion, for people who are well off already, or people who are already saving enough for retirement and don't are just the super savers, for example. This is not a book for somebody who has zero money in retirement, because it's not relative to you. And I think that's an interesting thing, because I think a lot of people want to pick this book up, but ultimately this is a book about privilege and about having a lot of money and not wanting to spend it. And that is not the reality for most of America and most of people in general. Most people do not have this conundrum of I have too much money, what am I supposed to do? So the whole time that I'm reading it, I kind of had that in the back of my head too. I'm just I don't really know that this is relative for me. My husband and I are saving money for retirement, but we're certainly not saving way too much, in my opinion. I think we're still probably technically behind. So the whole time I'm reading the book, I'm just is this even really relative to me? Will I ever really need to make this decision, or will the decision be made for me, because will I not have enough? So it was an interesting point in my life to read it, because I think we probably are saving enough for retirement, but I also don't think that we could step off the gas and be okay at this point. And that's something that kind of bothered me throughout the whole book, because a lot of the book, he talks about prioritizing experiences early in your life, so in your 20s and 30s. And the thing that I think isn't really talked about as much in the book is that to have like a comfortable retirement for most people, you have to be saving in your 20s and 30s because of compound interest. You can't really afford for most people to stop saving in your 20s and 30s and still be able to retire comfortably. And so I think like it's one thing to say like, yes, enjoy your 20s and 30s and don't like save 50% of your income. But I also don't think that that's like really what's happening in most, like I said, like that's not what's happening for most people. So I don't really think that it's as relevant. And I think that some of the rhetoric in the book is actually kind of dangerous, because there's even a point in the book where he says that you should consider taking out debt in these early ages, like 20 and 30s. You should maybe consider even taking out debt to have some of these experiences, which I think is really dangerous, because you never know. He talked a lot in the book about like having those higher earning years in your 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. But that is not promised. So I think it's really dangerous to say like maybe even take out debt in your 20s and 30s to have these like amazing experiences, when nothing is promised. You could lose your job tomorrow. You could never get a higher paying job. Like nothing is promised. And so I think it's kind of dangerous to tell people like, hey, take out debt to like go on a cruise. Like I just don't agree with that personally. And that really was what I struggled with throughout the whole book, is like the premise of the book I really did like, because I think that you should prioritize, or maybe balance is a better word. I think that you should balance having those memorable experiences in the present, but also trying to save for the future. And I think that yes, some people are going to the extremes on both ends. Like there are some people who aren't saving for retirement at all and are just focused on the present. And that is also dangerous in my opinion. And then we have the people on the other side, who's kind of who he's talking to, which is the people who are like saving 50 to 70% of their income. They're not going on vacations. They're not doing anything. They're just saving. And it's like, well, what are you saving for? So I think that it's like those two extremes. And then like the majority of us are like in the middle. Like we're saving for retirement, but we're not like, you know, saving a ton. We're saving like enough to comfortably retire. So that was kind of like my biggest struggle point through the book, is like just being like, okay, I agree with the main premise, but like the way we're getting there, I don't necessarily agree with, because I feel like he's completely like forgetting about the necessary compound interest that you have. If you're not saving in your 20s and 30s, it's going to take you so much more of your income to be able to retire comfortably. So you need to be saving in your 20s and 30s for retirement to be able to afford to retire comfortably, most likely for most of us. I'm talking to most of us. And I think that that's the trouble of the book, is that the book is talking to this very small portion of the population, but it is written in a way that makes it seem like it is talking to everyone. And I think that that is the thing that I disliked about the book the most. Now, something about the book that I did really like is his discussion of what he calls memory dividends. And this is basically just all the memories that you're accumulating through your life before retirement. And that is really what brings you true value. And I do agree with that. I think that building those memory dividends, whether it's through vacations or just spending time with family, is so critically important. If you guys are new to my channel or you haven't watched my channel recently, my sister actually passed away last year in May, completely unexpectedly, literally just died on a Sunday. Nobody had any clue. She wasn't sick, nothing, no warning. And that was like a very life-changing moment for me. And so I think that when I read this book, this is the most probably receptive that I've ever been to hearing this, because I know firsthand that life can change in an instant, and that those memories sometimes are all that you have from people. And so I think that that really hit me hard in the book, is like the discussion of like the memory dividends. But I also think that, again, it's like that balance of like, you can build those memory dividends with free things too. Like it doesn't always have to be like these like exorbitant activities. Like you don't have to go to a ski trip in the Alps to be able to build a memory dividend. Sometimes those memory dividends are like the dumbest things. Like when I think back about life with my sister, a lot of my memory dividends with her are like completely free things, or just like dumb little moments. And so I think that he was trying to use those like memory dividends as like a way to say that you need to be like spending all this money. But at the end of the day, like, yes, those are also memory dividends, but like you can also build those freely, and you can build those with your family with intention and not money. And so I think that that's like an interesting perspective that I had on the book, because I do agree. And like I said, I really liked the thought of like calling them memory dividends. I've never heard that before. I don't know if he like coined that phrase, but I liked it. I think it's really nice. But again, like I don't think that it is only focused on money necessarily, because you can build those memories by just spending time together, or like just doing things that maybe don't even cost money. But I think that a lot of us do lose sight of that, especially like I'm in my 30s, my almost mid 30s at this point. And I think that in this time of my life, it is hard sometimes to have those like just daily moments. Like life is so busy at this point, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate, especially if you have kids. Like, we're just getting through the day. Like, some days I'm just trying to get through the workday. I'm just trying to get through the sports. I'm trying to get through the appointments and all of the chaos. I'm trying to get through the commute. I'm trying to go through life. And so I think that this book did help me to look back and say, like, I need to be like making more of an effort to making those memories with my kids and with my family while I'm still here, while I'm still in good health. So I do appreciate that part of the book, but I do think that he focuses a little bit too much on the cost and not so much on just the effort. Like, you can do these things for free. It does not have to be expensive. You can go on a walk with your child, like one-on-one. I feel like that's a great way to spend time together. It doesn't have to be that you're going to Cabo or you're going to Hawaii. Now, those things are amazing and important too, but I think that he focuses a little bit too much on that instead of the true meaning of like what a memory is. Like, it doesn't have to be something that costs a lot of money. And at the end of the day, one of the hugest parts of this book is just focusing on not hoarding your wealth. So I think that this book also is talking a lot to like those early retirees or people who are in their 40s to like late 50s who are probably saving enough for retirement again, but are maybe like reluctant to retiring or reluctant to taking a step back when maybe they should. And I think that is an important thing to mention, because I know there is people who like stay in the workforce because they're scared of like running out of money. But in reality, like a lot of people probably do have enough at that age to be able to take a step back, especially if they have been saving since their 20s and 30s. And so it is important to, especially like I was thinking about this more so from the perspective of like my own parents. My dad is retired now, but I do see it in him too a little bit, that I feel like he is very reluctant to like spend his money, because it is scary, because like you don't know how long you're gonna live, which is something that he touches on in the book. And again, another point that I'm not sure that I fully agree with him on necessarily is like, he basically says to like use a calculator to like input, like you can input like your family medical history, your height, weight, age, all those things. You can kind of input these into calculators online, and it'll kind of give you like an estimated life expectancy range. But like, I honestly just struggle to like understand how that's worth it, because you truly don't know. Like, my grandmother was incredibly sick her entire life. She had 3 open heart surgeries. She was constantly sick. That's like my memories of her growing up were her being sick. My mom's memories of her while she was growing up was her taking care of her while she was sick. And so like, had we put her stuff into a calculator, I'm certain that it probably would have told us that maybe she would have lived into her 60s, maybe 70s. She lived well into her 80s. And so it's like, you just never know. And then again, my own sister, my full sister, was 42 when she passed away. She was healthy. She was average height, average weight, no medical history, nothing. No real like signs of anything. Like, she had never had any like major surgeries, major illnesses, and she died at 42. So it's like, I just personally, for me especially, I'm just like, I don't see how that's relevant, because truly you could die tomorrow or you could die in 50 years. Like, you just never know. And while those calculators may be like helpful to get a range, like, I just don't think that it's really relevant. I don't know. I really struggled with that part of the book. I know maybe some people would agree that like using something like that might make sense, but personally for me, I was like, I don't get it. I'm going to plan as if I'm going to live into like my 80s, 90s, and that's that. I don't know. I wouldn't want to bet that I'm going to die early and not save enough. And like that is something that he talks about a lot in the book, is like people are scared to die with no money, but like reality is most likely that's not going to happen. Like most people don't. But if everyone followed his advice, maybe they would. Does that make sense? Like nobody's probably, like not many people are following his advice right now. Most people are saving until, like saving for them to live forever, or they're trying to save as much as they can so that they can leave inheritance to their children. And so I don't think that his perspective on it is really relevant, because if everyone was following his advice, there would certainly be people who would die with zero negative. Like they would run out of money, and then what? And then what? Like that's the thing that I don't think that he really talks about in the book, is like, what if that happens to you? What do you do? Because that would be my personal worst nightmare, is to be in my 70s and run out of money and have to like rely on my children or rely on family to help me get by. Because once you're in your 70s, 80s, like you're not going to want or maybe even be able to work anymore. And so it's like, what other options do you have other than then relying on family? So I think that that's like another perspective that he doesn't really talk about. He references that like people are worried about dying with nothing and like hitting nothing before they die, but he doesn't really talk about like how to combat that. He just says that like that's not a reality for most people, and like yes, that's true, because they're not following your advice. And that's kind of like one of the last things that he talks about in the book, is like, well, what's the point in dying with zero? Like what about your kids? What about charities? What about things that you care about? And he talks a lot about that in the book throughout, and especially at the end, of like why you should still want to die with zero, even if you have kids, even if you have charities that you want to prioritize donating to, because you should want to prioritize that while you're alive. And he even says in the book that like you cannot be a generous person when you're dead. And I don't really agree with that. I think it's an interesting take. I understand where he's coming from. I do get it. But I also think that like just because you are dead does not make you a not generous person. If you are donating your money to a charity, you don't have to do that even when you're dead. Like nobody can force you to donate to like a charity of your choosing. Like that is something that you are making a conscious effort of when you are alive. So I don't really know how you could say that somebody can't be generous when they're dead, because they were generous when they were alive, when they were making that decision. Does that make sense? I don't know. I really like, this book really messed me up in my head, because I was just like the whole time I'm like, what? Like, I don't know. I some of it I was just like, I don't get it. Like, I feel like you're trying to make something so like crazy. Like, I just feel like you're trying to make a point so much that you're like playing mental gymnastics at times. But I will say, generally I do agree with the like, especially the children thing. Like I do want to give my children money while I am alive. That is a priority for me. And I do want to make sure that I'm not like, I don't want to like leave my kids with millions, which I don't think I would anyway, but like, I don't want to leave them with like a ton of money when they are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, like when my husband and I pass away. So I do agree with that part of the book where he says like, give the money away while you're alive. But I think that you have to be so careful to balance, like making sure that you do still have enough and that like you are still also giving money while you're alive. So that is something that I want to personally prioritize as I get older, is helping my kids out with college, helping them out with weddings. Like I do want to do that. And so that is something that I did agree with in the book, but that was already something that I had in my mind prior to reading it, was like, I do want to help my kids. I want to help them while I'm alive. I want to help them when they're in their 20s and 30s, when life is really difficult, because that is when that money would help you the most. When they're trying to buy a home, when they're trying to go to college or afford, their first apartment, like those are when money really would be helpful. Like I can't even imagine if I had gotten like a lump sum of money when we were in our, late 20s, early 30s. That would have been so helpful for us, like paying off our student loans, buying our first house. Like getting money at that point in life is so much more helpful than when you're in your 40s and 50s and you already have your retirement set and like you're already planning that. So I do agree with that part of the book, that like giving money away while you're alive is way more powerful. And I do think that it is great to give to charities now. Like he references in the book, like, don't wait to give to charities until you die because they could be making better use of your money today than they could in 20 years, which I totally agree with. But I do think it is a balancing act, and you can do both. That's the other thing too. Like you can plan to give your kids money now and donate to charities now, but you can also not necessarily want to die with zero. Like you can still die with money and like give that away too. And in my opinion, that does not make you any less generous than if you had done it when you're alive. That was like a part of the book that really bothered me. Like I was just like, I don't get what you're saying. I don't think that like you can say that somebody's not generous because maybe they were living in like a scarcity mindset and like they didn't want to give away. Now, like if you're dying with like $300 million, like maybe I would feel differently about that. But like if you are a regular person who has a modest retirement savings and like you are scared that like you could live into your 90s, but then you die when you're 70, I don't think that that makes you any less generous. Like you had complete, like you were not wrong to think that you could live into your 90s just because you die in your 70s, you know? So anyways, that is kind of my gist of the book. Again, I have been thinking about it a lot over the last few weeks. I ended up rating it, I think, a 3.5 out of 5. I did like that it challenged my thinking, but at the end of the day, I also think that there were a lot of points in the book that I just could not get behind and did not agree with. But I do think that it was a good book to challenge my mindset, and I think that it is worth a read, especially if you are heavy in like the FIRE community, or if you're really trying to like retire super early. It might be a good read for you to just challenge your perspective. I think that it's good to read books like that sometimes. And so while I didn't agree with a lot of the book, I did still enjoy the read because it did challenge me, and I still think about it. Like I said, I've been thinking about it for weeks, and it has really like caused me to rethink some of the decisions that we do make. And also I do want to prioritize more vacations in our future. Like that is something that after I read the book, I talked to my husband and I was like, okay, like I do think that maybe we are being a little bit too aggressive, and maybe we should be prioritizing things differently. Maybe we could afford to like drop back our retirement savings in the next few years. Now, I'm not ready to do that right now because we are at the ages where it is like the most important to be saving. But I do think that like in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, we could probably drop back our retirement contributions a little bit and focus more on spending money in the moment. So that is my review of the book. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read it and what you think about it. If you haven't read it, I will link it down below. I personally got it from my library. They might have a copy at your local library as well. And yeah, let me know if you have read it, if you're planning on reading it. I would love to hear about it in those comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye.